Well, here we are again. Hello. So, how are you?
I'm so great. Yes,
Huh.
I'm feeling
Well,
wonderful.
well, I've just got off listening to a little bit of a part one, and there were just so many little aspects of that was like tentacles. I'm going, oh, we got to go down that one with a bit more, and go down that one a little bit more. I was going, whoa. Um, as you see, everyone who is following this wonderful, wonderful opportunity to get ourselves out of poverty thinking into prosperity living. Um, Shay is on his way, so he's asked us to just dive in, and that is great. Now, if you haven't yet seen part one, then please, I do encourage you to do that. Um, but this morning, I suddenly remembered that I did a video about, I think it was July 2018, and I'm going to put the link in the chat. And it was all about something that you mentioned last time, and that was the balance of giving and receiving. And I did a whole video on that, sitting in a very luxurious motor launch at Hamilton Island. And so I just thought that people might like to go back and listen to that as well, because there is an enormous amount of imbalance in giving and receiving. So I thought I'd just pop that in there. So, as a result of our last communication, how have you been, and how's that all enlightened your life of prosperity?
It's been wonderful. What I love about the conversations that we're having is that they don't come from a place of like we know it all. They come from a place where we are also human and we are actively exploring. Um, we are actively exploring everything ourselves, and that for me has been something that I took to heart this past week, and I got a great opportunity presented to me by a friend of mine who is a business coach, and he invited me to come on to his podcast to share if I have any questions, if I have any curiosities, if I have any issues really around generating finance, but really looking at how what's underneath the surface of that. And so after our conversation, I was feeling very primed for that. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna dive straight in, and I'm gonna go with my. We have a saying in Dutch for that, going with our buttocks bare or something like that. I don't know how it translates in.
Sometimes it's better not to translate it.
I
No, I
know.
do. Yeah, it's going just with an open mind and heart, and receive whatever is coming. and,
Yeah.
and but that is what prosperity is about. We talked about something, and our energy was lifted because of what we were talking about, and that opened the door for you then to receive this opportunity. And that is what prosperity is about. It's not about receiving things in money. We have to go beyond that. It's such a tiny little bit of what is on offer in life. So
So true.
absolutely fabulous. Um,
Yeah.
so today so you set some tasks last time. You said, thinking about people using the word non-valuables when they're dealing with money. Personally, I love money, so that's not something I'm going to look. But what I loved about the end of what we talked about was it's giving meaning. So
Mhm.
when we're having an exchange, that is this giving meaning. So because so much of our let's talk about money to start with, we is wasted, right? And so whatever you use it for, to exchange for, look at, is that giving you meaning of
Yeah.
some sort? Is it going to enhance and enrich you? It brings me back to Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Man, Poor Man, which I've actually did quite a bit of work with him when he was in Australia many years ago. And so this idea, is it a liability or is it an asset before you spend something? And that, all of those little tricks is to remind you that you are in control of your own prosperity when you get that into balance, when you really understand that prosperity is a mindset. And we actually, you and I, we have this love of language. We talk ourselves in and out of a paper bag the whole time of whether we are reducing what comes into our life or expanding what comes into our life. And so I wanted to go to somewhere that we've discussed before, because it's all interconnected, and that is the connection between poverty consciousness and a phrase that we've all grown up with in the English language. I didn't grow up with it in our language, and that is the money is the root of all evil. And of course, the phrase actually has a missing link. Apparently, it is the love of money is the root of all evil. Either way, it sets you up for poverty consciousness. And when I looked at that, I went, hang on, there's a missing thing there. It's the root. So I took that to the next step of looking at the connection to that and the root chakra, which is all about security. And then I was given, because my guys having a field day on this one, and I was given, here we go, because it's all connected to our ancestral traumas, which of course we have been talking about so much. So when you look at your state of prosperity or poverty, look at your ancestry. And I know you've mentioned quite often about, your circumstances of birth and what you were born into. But go behind that and go, but where did that come from? There is a link. There's a link. And if you go back and you find that there is this continuation of a state of mind. And that is why also we hear so often the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. It's not because of the amount of stuff they have. It's because their lineage feeds forward that prosperity or poverty is a given. And until we break that link, and because we're about to move into this higher state of consciousness, the buck stops here. This is the generation that needs to now break that cycle. So there's so much at stake with this conversation. Whew, I'm going to take a deep breath. And so when I say that to you, how does that relate when I say, look at the root chakra and where are we in our sense of security? And then, yes, we need to do work on the intellect and our mind, song, and all of that. Mostly we need to heal the root chakra.
Yeah, so beautiful, Yvonne. You had wow, where to even start with this? The work that I do and the work that I've done on myself, that I call the great work, is really looking at all the unconscious patterns that are playing out. And so the way to see our unconscious manifestation that we seemed as humans believed for a long time that we're at the effect of, they all come from within. So we're the source point of it all. But indeed, when there are energetics that are of our own formation that aren't in wholeness, then we are going to be recreating patterns in our own life that are going to be representative of that non-wholeness. And I love how we can go into the root and the origin of things within ourselves, and that there lies something that is actually before that even, and that is which is the succession or the generational succession that we've come out of, which is easy to see. Most of us have grandparents that went through the First or the Second World War. And those days were harsh on humans and formed a lot of the collective consciousness, a lot of the ways of relating to life. And they had real hardship. And that then gets imparted unconsciously or consciously into the next generation. And those patterns keep playing out. My main focus has been addressing me, addressing my formation, my imprinting, my stories that I've been operating on based on unresolved trauma, and finding those parts and pieces to bring them back home, to dissolve those stories, to literally resolve the unresolved. And what I am finding is that beyond what we can clear on our own self, in our own subconscious mind, there is a tapestry and how we are interconnected with the generations that have come before us. And that tapestry is like an information source code. It's where it's the foundation from which the next generation then created its succession, and then another succession and another succession. And this is how it happens in nature. And we are, as a species, wired to accumulate more quantity and quality in our own individual life, because that is what all of nature is operating towards. And when we look at degraded lands, the way that degraded lands regenerate themselves is through this process of slowly over time accumulating more quantity and quality of what is called consolidated life into the system. And I feel that primarily holding on to a story of blame or victimhood or disempowerment of what we got given by the previous generation for us to build on is very ineffective. Because if you then go to the generation before that and the generation before that, then you can start seeing that the generation that we are coming out of, in terms of our fathers, our mothers, that we are actually building on their success. We're actually creating more of what they laid as a foundation for us to operate with. And it's very beneficial to look at how they were formed and how they were infused with their programming, in order to really see that there has been gradual growth. And what that does, it takes out of the equation this sense of I wasn't given, everything that I could have been given, but they didn't have it because it actually wasn't in the ancestral ecology. It wasn't actually available in the ecosystem, in the consciousness. And so poverty consciousness, slowly but surely through generations, has the ability to elevate itself back into syntropy, back into prosperity. And that takes work. And this part of looking at the ancestral imprinting is really relevant, because it allows us to see with eyes that are not judgmental that we have actually been moving upwards. And we may still be struggling in our own individual lives, but at the same time, when we get a broader perspective, we can see, everyone can see, that we are all so much better off than those that went through the First World War, the Second World War. My grandparents, had the opportunity to explore what it was to eat tulip bulbs, because that was pretty much all that was around to eat. And I can see that we're in a totally different phase. Now, one piece that we may go into later is how important it is to release these ancestral stories, so that we can actually rewrite the narrative and we can actually script the story for the generations to come, based on prosperity and based on being resilient and being resourceful. Because if we don't address these unconscious narratives, we're going to pass them on. And that's, of course, where we have a great opportunity during our life to set the next generation up in resonance with the natural order, in coherence with what life is actually wired for, accumulating more quantity and more quality of life dense energy. And we can translate that in our own world into finance if we want. But as you mentioned, this notion of prosperity is much more than just that singular element. And for me, I see that life always wants to provide the opportunities for more accumulation and more aggregation and more integration of prosperity. It's just that I, for most of my life, because of the stories that I had a lens through to view those stories through. Oh, this guy wants to get me, and he's probably gonna excavate my. Oh, I don't know if I want to do that. Meanwhile, if I am just willing to take what life is offering me and go in wholeheartedly with courage, I may actually be able to unravel a little bit more, see more clearly at the end of it, and then be able to work with a new mindset to see myself different, to see money different, to see my worth in a new light, and how to actually language that.
You just said the magic word, worth. Everything you say is just so true. And when you talk about your grandparents and the tulip bulbs, it reminds me that when I was a child, of course, it was the beginning of World War II in occupied country. So we had, I don't know if we had tulip bulbs to eat, but I think what we did have was sugar beet. I don't know. Yep. And my mum used to make all sorts of things from that. Um, so yes, it was an interesting time to grow up in. And so what you then learn from the get-go is to appreciate everything that comes to you. Everything that comes to you. And I think that has been lost a bit in the generations recently, where materialism and commercialism has become rife. That sense of appreciation for everything. It's it is what drives my life. So, or the word thank you and this amazing gratitude for every little thing that comes my way, or that's available to me, has really been imprinted upon me and has been one of my greatest strengths in every time where things have become difficult, to turn to, yes, but what do I have? And what you just said is the growth. We have so much more, and we have far more than we need. But the word worth. So let's look at that, because again, I believe we have in our life what we believe we are worthy of. Whoever created that word worth, oh boy, were they looking after you? Not. Where do we measure that? What measurement stick do we use to become worthy? Hey, there are lots of people who are using it, and we're buying into it. What is this business about worth? It's what we always talk, something that Shay talked about last time, and that was all about having your creation, whether that your art of creation, and putting a value to it, and giving it a worth. You cannot put any value on something that's come from within you as a creation. What you can, whilst we still have money as a form of exchange, what we can do is to look at what feels comfortable for us to be able to put a price on whatever it is. What you do, what we do on these conversations, these podcasts that we have all the time, they are invaluable. The wisdom and the knowledge and the knowingness that we share, the generosity of heart. How can you put a value on it? So we've decided not to, and we just give it away. And does that mean that we're silly? No, because in my eye, it doesn't matter, because whatever I put out there of value of this high frequency, the supply will come. It doesn't have to come from this. It will come from other places. This is a very, very giant universe of equal exchange. And so I have so much coming into my life. And in the video that I've actually put link in the chat for it is, and I've also just put part 1 there. So if people want to see the first part of this, is the fact that whatever comes into your world comes to you because of what you've already sent beforehand. So it's not like we're programmed that I have to pay for something before I get, well, that is it. You've already paid. If something is coming to you, you then don't have to pay again. You need to realize that what comes to you is a reflection of what you've already sent out energetically. So the more wonderful energy you send out, the more wonderful supply that comes your way. That is how this universe works. And when we get that, then we can examine and go, so what mind song, as you call it, do I sing in there about my self-worth? What is not to be worthy? To me, I think that word needs to go on a piece of toilet paper and flush down the loo, because it is one of the most damaging words besides should that is imprinted upon us. And it's imprinted in the education system, in every which way that we look at how we are so-called governed by others. We're constantly having to measure up to someone else's rules and regulations, which have nothing to do with us. So coming home to, again, we come back to our self-worth, our self-value, our self-love, and not as these human forms, but as these wonderful conduits of creation. This is what we talked about last time. It was, we are conduits of creation. We are direct channels of the quantum field of infinite opportunities and possibilities, prime creator, whatever you want to call where things come from, where the origin of creation lives. We are tapped into that. And so we need to tap into that consciously, open ourselves up and go, yes, I am open to receive. And I really would like to address this balance of giving and receiving, because we get it so out of balance. And what happens is that we give, and then we don't receive things back, and instantly we go into resentment. I've given you so much, you give me nothing. The minute you think that, then why are you giving? Are you giving to get back? Or are you giving because that is your nature? One of the things I talk about in that previous video is the fact that what do you do when someone gives you something? Do you instantly go, oh, you shouldn't have? Oh, that's so sweet of you, but really, look, you really don't waste your money on that, right? How do we receive a gift? If we cannot receive a gift, it doesn't matter what it is, with the generosity of receivership, in other words, with grace and gratitude, then we are taking away something very beautiful from the giver. And that is something that we've all got to learn to get in balance. If you feel that you're giving more than you are receiving, then you need to go back and you need to have a look at where you're giving and where you feel you're not receiving. And if it's from the same place, then you've got the equation out of balance. Because it's not about I give there and I expect it back from there. I give because that is what I choose to do, because it feels good. And then wherever it wants to come from, it'll come. It's so important to get that balance right in your life, just giving and receiving. Are you open to receive? If you're in poverty consciousness, you're never open to receive. There's a big missing link that. There's another little thing that I would like to ask you. When you go out for coffee with people and they offer to pay for it, do you say, no, 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 I'll pay for it? And have a little toss about, who's going to pay? Eventually someone pays. If the other person pays, do you then say, oh, I'll get it next time?
Wow.
Pick one. Or do
Yeah.
you just say thank you? Or do you give the money for your coffee to the lady, to the cashier, and say, give that's for the next person who wants a cup of coffee? See, there are so many ways to really get this giving and receiving in balance. Yes.
Yes. So great. There is a natural exchange happening in nature all the time.
Mhm.
And that happens unconditionally, which is a strange word because it basically says no conditions. We have been programmed, of course, into believing a whole bunch of things that aren't of the natural order, that aren't in a natural frequency. They are operating in within the context of this false copy of reality. And reality is very different than life. Life
Yeah.
is the living expression based on truth of what is alive, and reality is the man made world of ideas that is constructed out of a whole bunch of ideologies that have been transgenerationally handed down. And this has greatly influenced our ability to relate to life in the living and the natural processes. And we're more predispositioned to operate based on how we've been programmed. And this receiving element comes for many actually down to their own primary imprinting, is that there was conditional giving going on. Um, One of the things that comes to mind is this story that still is there in the background for me sometimes, but I never sound it out. But I recognize that it's probably been part of what I've observed or experienced myself is when I finally, or when I give something generously out of the generosity of my heart to my partner or to someone that I love, the story comes on. Yeah, well, don't ever tell me that I didn't give you anything. So, and I don't sound that out, but I'm very curious. Like, wow, that's definitely part of the programming that I either observed or experienced. And as younglings, if we're not raised in that we are enough, and not that we're enough, but that we're perfect as we are, then the conditions are being put on how we see ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. And that conditioning is really stifling so much then later in life of our ability to receive, receiving love, receiving money, receiving fair exchange for what it is that we do for others. And then we jump to this like, oh, no, no, I'll get that. Don't worry about it, because there's a pain point maybe around money, that if somebody pays for something, well, then they had to maybe at some subconscious level suffer to be able to bring that into the shared experience. And I think that this training ourselves to receive is one of the most valuable trainings that we can really embark ourselves into, to really train ourselves in the willingness to receive, because the universe has so much to offer. Life, humans around us, we are naturally wired to express love and gratitude and affection through all sorts of means. And if we have uncomfortability in receiving, well, then we have uncomfortability in attracting and manifesting. And most of us are really good at giving, but do we give out of a place of natural love frequencies that are generosity without a contract? or are they perceived investments so that I can get a return, or is it more out of obligation? I have to. There's so much around receiving and giving that we benefit really looking at within. And I feel personally that all of the language that we are navigating here in this topic of poverty consciousness is that it all, again, it has a root, it has an origin. And the word worth actually in its origin really only means to turn. English used to be a language in its Celtic forms, and all older structures of language were just words were used to describe activities that were happening. And worth in that sense is best seen to be something that turns, something that is active, a turning of something. And when you look into the etymological studies of worth, where it finds itself a root is in the word worship, which was worthship. And the way that I navigate the English syntax analytical world that I kind of dive into, and I dive deep into, where does it really come from? Worth really has become something because sin became something. And in my looking at what words mean, I often feel into what is the opposite sound of that, and not so much in the sense of like what's the direct opposite, but if this worthiness feeling is something that I've struggled with in the past, what could have been the cause of that? So what has been the distortion of naturally feeling healthy in worth? And for me, what instantly comes about is the program of an external authority called the church stepping in, telling everybody that you're born in sin and you have to worship this almighty God that can then bestow something, but you actually have to pay us to get your message across to him back in the early days. And so worship, in terms of worthship, as it is found in the etymological roots of the word worth, can be traced back to that same patriarchal, institutionalized religionism that has really formed in all the previous generations so much of their unconscious ways of relating, because they weren't questioning words, they weren't pulling the programming apart. They had no need at that point to do that, because they were still so much more in direct connection with the natural world. And what we're really trying to steer ourselves back into is the natural balance with nature, which is the natural balance with our own human nature. And that's something that we cannot do externally, but we can refine that balance inside. And there lies then also the balance between the giving and the receiving. The story of being sinful and being worthy. The stories of not being good enough to receive based on programs of beliefs that were just the operating systems of ideas and constructs that our parents were programmed with and their parents were programmed with. A lot of it is all stuck in language. And what I love about the etymological research that I often do around words like this is that it instantly allows us to see that this word has a root and that the distortions have just progressed over time. But when we don't go to the root, we cannot actually assess where it came from, how it got formed, and we lack then the comprehension. It's like, yeah, of course, the church came in. We were all sinful. So we were all unworthy of the love of God, of the grace of God, or whatever we want to call it. And with the introduction of sin and not being good enough and having to strive to be a better human being all the time, this word worth came into being. And the worth word in itself was that we had to labor to turn things in nature. We had to turn the soil, we had to turn the harvest, we had to turn the things that needed turning in order to generate the prosperity, in order to generate the life-giving energies that we can then take in and start exchanging. And when we get to that place of discovering where words like this have come from, we have a new ability to maybe even discard that word and be like, yeah, I'm not going to go there. But then there is the question, how do we dissolve our own unconscious programming? And this is what you and I so often talk about, which is beautiful. And that's something that you offer in the private work that you do with people, is to help them see through the illusions and
Yeah.
help them regain their own inner connection, that then all of a sudden isn't about worth. It isn't about whether or not we are good enough. It is about whether or not we are willing and able to fully love ourselves and love all those old stories back into wholeness. And similarly, I share this with people in how to undo that programming, release that toxic or that unnatural way of relating to ourselves and each other and money, in order to then come back to what really resides there, is a homeostasis based on love and a frequency of it is good. I almost wanted to say I'm not good enough. It is good. And this is what I feel these conversations are so valuable around, is to refining the balance that we lost with nature and therefore we lost with our human nature. But we can restore that lost balance within by upgrading our ways of seeing through the myths and the illusions that language really represent. And I agree with you. We benefit putting that word on a piece of toilet paper and flushing it down.
Yeah, but before we do that, we do need to alchemize and integrate that that worthiness within ourselves. Um, it is the power of that word that we need to flush. The power that keeps us into victimhood that we need to flush. And it's only when we look at that, and there's another word that goes with that, and that is deservability. Um, and it's funny because sometimes, it was yesterday, even I used it. Someone said to me, a very dear friend of me who came to Brekkie on Monday morning, and he said, "Gosh, you must be so proud looking at all these people around me who are so full of love and joy." And I looked at him and I said, "No, I see that word really doesn't resonate with me at all." And I said, "But I feel humbled." And then the next thing that I said was, I said sometimes I think, what did I ever do to deserve that? Well, now that is just such an imprint of conditioning. Because do I have to do something to deserve that? That is yet another thing that we are taught by whoever, either education or all the ones that have been ruling our lives for so long. And everything that you and I do is giving people back their sovereignty and bringing them in direct connection to the only master that matters, and that is that which created you in the first place. And why the heck am I here? So let's get on with that, and let's forget all the other stuff that people are trying to diminish us with. That is what always comes up for me, that this idea of I need to deserve it, I need to be worthy, I need to do all of those kinds of things. And so, but again, I want to come back to this word root, because we talk about the root of the word and the root of, and so what is the root of this overwhelming sense of not good enough? And the root of that really is, to me, it is, what is the purpose? What is the purpose? Why has it been instilled in the collective um, with so much power? And the only answer that you come up with is so that we become very, very vulnerable to being ruled. And that is, as long as we believe we're not good enough, then it is very difficult to get our mind song to that feeling of empowerment, of having the power within. And so this time of transition where we are moving into a higher state of consciousness consciously is all about taking back that power at every level. And so right now we're talking about it in this place of poverty consciousness versus prosperity consciousness. There is a simple switch that we can make though, and that everything comes back to being self-observing and self-listening. So what is the language that you speak about the generosity of life? Do you focus on the things you don't have, or do you focus on all that is around you and see it as a gift and have gratitude for that? Do you walk into a supermarket and say, I can't look at all the prices, I can't afford that, or do you go in there and look and say, wow, I've only got $10, but look at all the choices that are there for $10. See, it's a mindset, and so we need to be able to go beyond the programming to be free from that really deep conditioning that has been going on for eons, and create and be the conscious creator of our prosperity. So again, we need to examine a few words. What is the meaning of wealth to you? What is the meaning of prosperity to you? Does it mean dollars in the bank? Or does it mean that someone took you out for dinner last night? I was taken out for dinner last night by one of my sons and his wife and beautiful granddaughter, and it was the most beautiful evening. And I go home feeling so blessed and go, oh my Lord, look at how prosperous I am, and how, this is just beautiful. This is life-giving me. And remember that word, it's life-giving. And so you talk a lot about, this relationship with the flora and fauna and nature itself, which we're part of. And it is all about coming to that realization, whatever you are engaged in, is it life-giving? And if it's life-giving, it's prosperous. If it is life-diminishing, it's poverty. Very simple, really. Very simple. I wrote a long time ago in a little book called Pearls of Vision, daily, I can't even remember what it was, Pearls of Vision. And I wrote, you're not rich because you have money. You have money because you feel rich. So when you put all your attention on all the blessings that come your way every day, and that is, you wake up and, there's air to breathe. We take so much for granted. I sit up every morning and I'm about to go and open myself up to receive the messages from wherever they come to write my next post. And I sit there and I go, look at me. I've got a beautiful cup of tea. I have a purring cat. I have a laptop that is wonderful. And there's nothing lacking in my life in that moment. And when we bring ourselves to this moment, there's most of the time nothing lacking. But we're concerned about what will be lacking in the next moment or next week or next year. Well, I don't know. I might not be here by then. So I only have now. And right now, I have everything that anyone would need in this moment. And it is putting those moments together with gratitude and feeling blessed for whatever it is that is on offer to you. And that brings me to something else. When things don't work for us, we instantly feel diminished. We feel not good enough. We feel punished or put upon, or whatever energy or emotions that come from that experience or that we allow from that experience. For me, whenever something occurs in my life that doesn't feel so good, I instantly stop and go, hang on a minute, what gem are you offering me? What's in that for me to grow from? You're telling me something I need to pay attention to that is going to bring life to me. In other words, I don't collapse into that moment of limitation. I see that moment of limitation as an opportunity to become more life giving to me by seeing it as a message, as a moment of choice, moment of discernment, but always as a gift. So the other day, I was offered this situation where people were having a problem with their relationship, and they were within a family. And so I looked at that, and they were going, this is I can't go there. And I go, but why don't you just stop and go, what a wonderful opportunity to experience unconditional love. I am not supposed to change that person, but it gives me an opportunity to become someone who can go beyond the judgment, and go, I'm choosing to love you unconditionally. That's not an easy task, but boy, when you manage it. So this is what happens when you allow yourself to learn from the tough moments. Anything that offers you an opportunity for life is prosperous. Anything that doesn't pushes you into that place where we've been and where we want to get out of. Hey, how are you? Welcome.
Hey, thanks, Yvonne. Hey, Sovereign.
Hey,
Apologies.
hello. So good you can join. Awesome.
Apologies for my extreme tardiness, but
Well,
I'm here.
you must have had something very prosperous to be doing.
Yeah, it was definitely a beautiful kind of access to higher consciousness, let's say.
Well, that's all that we need. We've just been chit-chatting for quite some time,
No.
to have a continuum of what we talked about the last time. So I'd love to hear. Have you looked at that again? Because I've looked at our part one and I went like, whoa, there's so much in that.
Yeah.
So I just love you to fill us in and go, well, what was it in that made you go, well, we need to definitely talk more about that bit.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Yvonne. I actually did listen to the conversation again myself, and I really love the diversity of perspectives that we all brought into the middle in that space. And I, what I mean, I guess just to kind of highlight a little bit on what the message that I was trying to convey and get across, particularly as I had that focus on the three-dimensional reality and looking at money and relating, that piece. I also kind of contemplated on it more. And as I was in the garden the other day and I was working with the plants and I was just exploring, and I was in the interview touching a lot on the benefit of stacking skill sets. And I related that to the business side of things, that if you're in business, you can stack your marketing and your sales and your delivery of the product and the fulfillment, then you become a valuable kind of player in the game of business. And then I started to look at in the garden, wow, if I have skills in being able to cultivate soil, and then I have skills in being able to, take care of plants and grow food, and then I have skills in harvesting and knowing what to do with the plants and how to cook them or prepare them or provide longevity of storage for these seeds or these plants. And then I have these other skills in being able to bring people together to be able to enjoy the benefits of all this food that I've stacked all these skill sets. Then I become a very valuable asset to the community, right? Because I'm stacking all of this knowledge and this wisdom and these skills to offer in service to the greater collective. And just looking at my examples last week were very much in the business realm, and this week I just wanted to offer another example on the value, what we really value in for life, to expand and to grow and to be able to serve and support. And ultimately that perception of what is valuable in our world that we find ourselves in, particularly in being a human being and being a mammal, in our relationships, not just to each other as we're having this conversation, we're relating to each other's perspectives on what it takes to overcome a mindset or behaviors of being in poverty and being in lack and in scarcity, but more so, what does it take in order to relate in a way that we can have an expanded, omnipresent omnipotence of growth and realization, to see that ultimately, if we really tap into it, consciousness for me is the conscious awareness of a creator that has infinite potential to have unlimited intelligence. Now, if I recognize that as something out there at least, and something within here, then my potential to transcend the old beliefs or the old behaviors or the scarcity and the poverty and the not enough and the limiting areas that's holding me back, or that's coming up for me in a moment of challenge or a block, then I can just return to that truth of the omnipotence, of the intelligence, of that potential to help me and guide me as a tool to break through that block or that challenge and come out the other side like like a flower does as it comes, and it's like budding and budding, and next minute it explodes like a firework, and it just like shines so bright, all its beauty and its magnificence, and it's just all its color, and it's attracting all of these beautiful insects and bees and butterflies and bugs and whatnot, and in that moment realizing that just like the flower, myself too, when I break through that veil and I overcome the past, poverty ways of being, that I expand into something that is absolutely gorgeous in its beingness, and that me too, and just everyone too has that potential, and recognizing that it becomes a choice as well as a commitment and a devotion to realizing that every single day in our lives. And often it can be challenging because we find ourselves going one step back sometimes, and then 2 steps forward, and then 1 step back and 2 steps forward. But the relevance of having these conversations for me is that we can remind each other to remember, what we're really made of and what we're really capable of, and why we're really here, what our true purpose is in supporting one another to be the flower and go beyond. So that's my my little relation to our chat.
I love that. Hey, and if you are, you are a flower. What kind of flower are you?
Oh, I like that question. We got lots of nasturtium flowers happening at the moment, and they're beautiful flowers because they're very tasty. Go good in
You
salad.
want to be nibbled on? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I just love how you've just come in with such flow and ease. Absolutely perfect. But I like to pick up a couple of things there, and it is this skill set. Because yes, you're so eloquent in how you describe in the garden how you're learning all these skill sets. For me, and this is where all of my work has been and continues to be, is the skill set of how to work me. To learn how can I nurture the soil that I'm growing in. How do I create an environment around me that is going to support the best of me so that I can produce the flower, and that flower can then grow to its full potential. So it is learning to be the best of me by knowing me, by upskilling into being the champion of life in me. We have such reverence and such, we cheer the champions, right? I mean, I've done it, you've done it, yay, there goes a great basketball player and a great tennis player and a great runner and a this. Well, I just want to cheer the three of us because I think we are great livers. And I don't mean, the organ. I mean, we take life and we're giving it a heck of a shake. And, that is for me the skill set that I work on every day. What is it in me that I can still discover that can be expanded and that can be released and set free into creation for my good and the good of all? Which brings me back to the earlier statement I made about healing the root chakra. Because that root chakra is all about where we're seated and where we are, which is to do with our sense of security and our comfort. And that is something I'd really like to encourage everyone to examine. And where are you seated there? And so really to do some work on that root chakra, to send lots of love, because we are really constantly encouraging people to put love into the heart and to go from here to here to here. But we must be grounded. We must have our roots into the earth. We need to be grounded. So we mustn't ignore the lower chakras. And so I'm really being told we've got to examine, where are we seated? How do we feel about our sense of security? And then this real skilling up on being the best of who we are in the moment, and then never giving up on the growth of that. I'm often told, people look at me and they go, I can't, you never change. It's amazing what you do. It's amazing what you look like. I just find that sometimes a little uncomfortable. But then I look at that and I go, yes, but that isn't an accident. It's what you just talked about, Shay. It is my commitment. And it's my devotion. I love those two words that you just said, because in my book, The Secret to Life, I have, the success. Oh, you got it. Fantastic. Well, in there is a success formula. And in the near future, I'm going to make that available for people. But the thing is, the success formula starts with that, 7 steps: commitment, dedication, which is the devotion. And then because we go to discipline. Thank you, boys. It is available. So, it's available again on Amazon. And so you can find The Secret to Life. So, and it is a tool book. But this commitment and devotion to self, we tend to get very easily committed to outside sources and things, and to our families and to our friends. But we have to have this inner commitment to self and be devoted to that. How devoted are you to you? Because everything radiates from that. We are the center of our universe. So the more that we skill up on learning how we work and how and who and how we are related to this prime creative force. And that's the work that I've done now over 30 years. And, the people that are willing to go there and to really dig deep, their life transformation is phenomenal. And this setting yourself free from the old conditioned self and finding what is in underneath the authenticity of who we are in truth. That is such an amazing gift to me. So those words really, really resonated with me, Shay, and such a beautiful segue into what we've been talking about and what we are attempting to share with people, because everything that we do here and everything that Shay is involved in and Sov is involved in and I'm involved in is to support people to rise up and become the very best of themselves. So before I just hand it back to you, there's something I want to share about money, because I love money. I think it's great. There is a movement. There's two things. There's a global movement at the moment. It's called, let me just get it here. It's called, I'll put it in the chat in a minute. It's called keepcashalive.com. And it is saying no to using cards and saying and really keeping cash alive for the main purpose, so we have control over it, but also because it stops the fees that people are being charged, and the businesses are getting charged, we're getting charged, and so that's just something that I wanted to share with money. But there's a phrase that I love, and it comes from the movie Hello, Dolly. And it says, money is like manure. The more you spread it around, the more it makes little things grow. Syntropy in action. Souvereign.
So wonderful. Yeah, the syntropic nature of life, once comprehended, has ramifications and permeates through pretty much everything that we can be addressing and the things that we are speaking around and towards. And there is always an ongoing increase of quality and quantity of life. That is the syntropic nature. There's always just more of. My easiest example is just to take a tomato and cut it open and take the seeds out. You plant all those seeds and you only had one tomato. Now you got 30 or 40 tomato plants, each with 5 or 10 or 15 tomatoes. And so within you take one generation to plant the next generation, and all of a sudden you have, it is exponential what's happening. And we are just hijacked as a human species into this poverty consciousness. And when you look at the word poverty, where it comes from in its root is poor. And where I like to then apply that language, as opposed to trying to figure out where those words make sense in the English reality, I take those words and take them into nature. Poor soil, well, that actually doesn't exist. Or a poor yield. And so the root of language is all tied back to nature and the natural processes. And when we understand the natural processes, we can consciously start aligning with that and align our mind song, tend to our mind gardens that were programmed with so many belief systems that are of lack and of scarcity. And what I love about this conversation, that is all about overcoming, so overturning, it's moving out of, moving beyond, leaving behind the port of so-called poverty consciousness, which is a state of mentality. It requires a willful commitment to actually overcoming it. If you know that it's real, if you know that you're suffering from it, if you know that it's sometimes popping its snarky little head up again, are you willing to overcome it? Are you willing to move beyond it? And the beautiful thing is that as we move out of something, we also have to move through it. We have to look at it. We have to figure out where did these constructs of ideas really come from? What were my grandparents really thinking, feeling, living through, navigating through? How does the transgenerational hand down of poverty consciousness still reverberate in my life? How is it still manifesting itself? And then looking at the words and what they actually mean and where they actually come from, what is really funny about this word worth that is just turning something into it? It is a mode of action. We've really connected it to self-worth. And so when you look at that, that has a lot to do with our purpose and our sense of purposefulness, which is when we look at syntropy, everything in life is performing a function with purpose. So how are we performing our function with purpose? And when we sense that we have a lack of purpose, which is a lack of meaning, then we benefit getting really real with that. We benefit really assessing that and saying, well, how can I cultivate more meaning and more purpose in my life? Purpose and meaning are tied to prosperity, and not prosperity just in the sense of monetary returns. No, wealth. And wealth in its essence of what it means as a word is just happiness. It's been kind of taken over to become, again, tied to the corporate syntax that English was really crafted for. So when we go down into the root of the Celtic languages and the Latin roots and the origin of words, we can still see that there's a lot of connection between nature and man's relationship with nature, with the flora and the fauna world that is active there. But English was formed to be a contract and commerce and trade language. And so a lot of these intrinsic relationships to nature have been stripped out. And all we have to do is just go to etymologyonline.org and you just type in whatever word you want to actually dissect. And you go down and you can actually see that there is an original correlation. And by seeing a different perspective by what words were meaning back in the days, we all of a sudden get an opportunity to not just have an unconscious relationship with language, but we have choice. And from that choice, which we didn't have before, because we were unconsciously using language, from that choice point, all of a sudden, we can see the fallacy, we can see the falseness, we can see the illusion, but we can really see the root origin of where this syntax has come from, and that it was constructed to expand empire. And so if it was to do that, and then it got infested with an artificial lack and scarcity orientation to increase profits, we can just review some of the words that we're using and review some of the language that we are just so familiar with, and see through the lens of syntropy the contrast of how language is actually tied to nature, how language in its origin is tied to natural processes. And those processes are everything that's being spoken about here. Is this, we are recipients of life. We are recipients of oxygen, of nutrients, and we have an active engagement in that relationship to cultivate more life, to cultivate more wealth, to cultivate ourselves on an individual level. And what I love about this syntropic orientation is that it allows us a perspective on how we can take responsibility and act on that responsibility that we have. And these conversations for me are just rich, and they're super valuable. And I see really that our self-worth is us turning ourselves into that which we want to become. That's what which we are willing to step into and step through. And as we become willing, we are indefinitely going to overcome this poverty consciousness. It's letting go of an old layer, and what emerges out of that is seeing life again as to what it all has on offer. Walking into that supermarket and realizing, wow, yeah, I may only have $10, but wow, look what I can all get with that. And it's coming back to that joy, that excitement for what is possible, what can become available, and dreaming consciously into that, so that the narratives of the transgenerational hand-downs can actually be dissolved. And where I would like to go in a future conversation is the freeing up of our ancestry, that until we release the ties unconsciously that we carry through our lineage, through our genealogy, There are so many spirits and there's so many ancestors that are still bound to our circumstance of events. And when we free ourselves of poverty consciousness, we free generations of the past to also transcend their stuck narratives.
That is so beautiful. And that's exactly where I thought we ought to, go to as we're coming sort of to the end of this conversation. Um, because that is the root of it all. I keep coming back to that. It's the root of it all comes from us, our ancestry and the experiences that they've had, and we carry that on. And so when we can take that to the next step where we can heal that within us, we can heal that for them. And it's only when the past lineage is freed from their trauma that we are completely free from our trauma, and we're not passing it forward for our children. And that, of course, is another amazing subject. So we are coming to the completion of this conversation today. But, before I just asked Shay to close us out with some more words of wisdom, I would like to just share with everyone who does listen to this, to share it and to see it not just as three people talking at you, but as a gift. Because this is what it is. That's my intention. I know that it is Sovereign's intention and it's Shay's intention. These conversations are a gift to everyone who listens. And whatever you take away from it, if you see it as a blessing, as an opportunity for change, as an opportunity for expansion, as an opportunity of passing it forward, then our job's done. Although I think that word job is really not one that I use. But our moments are spent very fruitfully. So I want to thank again Sovereign. Wonderful. I just love these conversations. They're expanding for us, but I know they're expanding for many people. And Shay, thank you. And I just keep thinking of you in that garden. And as a nasturtium, I'll just have a whole new view of you now. So would you like to take us out with some more words of wisdom, please?
Oh, I just want to say thank you. Yeah, I'm just grateful for these opportunities to chat and for the community and all the support that everyone continues to show. So I'm really, really grateful for both of you guys, Yvonne and Sovereign, and just appreciate you a lot. So look forward to the next conversation as well.
So let's all be prosperous in every way and keep opening yourself up and be willing to receive. I did do a post on it today. And, the more open we are to receive, the more will flow in.
Love it.
So thank you again. Beautiful, beautiful beings that you are. And let's have a beautiful, prosperous day, week, year ahead. Thank you. Till next time.